Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm super excited to dive into something really cool today. We're exploring American operational art, 1917 to 2008 from Chapter 5 of Operational Art. I've got 10 awesome questions and answers straight from the book, and I'm going to break them down in super simple English so everyone can understand. Whether you're a history buff or just curious, this is going to be fun. So, let's jump right into the first question. Question 1 states, define the term operational art as used in the context of US military doctrine. How does it differ from the operational level of war? So, first, let's talk about operational art. Think of it as the big plan for how the military fights battles and campaigns to win a war. It's like being the master chef who decides how to mix all the ingredients, soldiers, tanks, planes, to cook up a victory that matches the country's big goals, like winning a war or stopping an enemy. Operational art is all about designing and planning those fights so that small battles, called tactics, lead to the ultimate prize, like ending a conflict. It's less about being super creative and more about making smart plans that work. In short, it's the way the military uses its forces to hit those big picture goals. Now, how's that different from the operational level of war? This is more about who is making those plans and where they're doing it. The operational level is like the command headquarters, usually at the corps level or higher, where the big bosses have enough troops, gear, and resources to plan large-scale operations. This level was created to act like a bridge between the small-scale fighting, tactics, like a single battle, and the huge national goals, strategy, like winning the whole war. It also helps keep the battlefield plans focused and stops political leaders from meddling too much in the day-to-day fighting. So, to sum it up, operational art is the planning and designing of how to win, while the operational level is the command level where those plans are made. Pretty cool, right? Alright, moving on to question 2, which states, explain the concepts of war's first grammar and second grammar. Provide examples of each from US military history. Okay, let's make this super simple. The first grammar of war is all about fighting the enemy head-on with direct force. Think big battles with tanks, planes, and soldiers clashing to defeat the other side. It's like a classic boxing match where you aim to knock out your opponent. The US military is really good at this. For example, in Desert Storm in 1991, the US led a massive attack to push Iraqi forces out of Kuwait with lightning-fast air and ground assaults. Another example is the Afghanistan invasion in 2001 to 2002, where US forces quickly toppled the Taliban. And let's not forget the Iraq invasion in 2003, where American troops rolled into Baghdad in a matter of weeks. Whether it's on land, in the air, or at sea, this direct, battle-focused style is what the US military has mastered. Now, the second grammar of war is totally different. This is about irregular warfare, things like insurgencies or guerrilla tactics, where the enemy doesn't fight you in open battles, but uses hit-and-run attacks or blends into the population. It's like trying to fight a shadow. The US faced this big time in Iraq after 2003, when the initial invasion was over, but insurgents kept attacking with roadside bombs and ambushes. This kind of warfare is way harder for a military that's trained for big battles, and the US has had to work hard to get better at it. They're still learning how to be as awesome at this sneaky, irregular stuff as they are at the direct, battle-focused first grammar. So, to wrap it up, the first grammar is about crushing the enemy in straight-up fights, like in Desert Storm or the Iraq invasion, while the second grammar is about tackling tricky, guerrilla-style warfare, like in Iraq after 2003. It's like the difference between a sword fight and a game of hide-and-seek. Awesome, right? We're on a roll now. Dosto, if you're liking this video, please do like, share, and subscribe. Alright, let's move on to question 3, which states, what were the primary lessons learned by the US military regarding air power during the interwar period? Okay, the interwar period is the time between World War I and World War II, roughly the 1920s and 1930s. During this time, the US military was figuring out how to use airplanes in war, and they learned some super important stuff. Let's break it down in a way that's easy to get. First, they realized that air superiority is a must. That means you have to control the skies by beating enemy planes before you can do anything else, like bombing or supporting troops. It's like making sure you're the king of the playground before you start playing your game. Second, they saw that long-range bombing had a lot of potential. They thought, hey, we could fly far and drop bombs on enemy factories or bases. But there was a catch. The bombs weren't very accurate back then, so they didn't always hit the target. It was like trying to throw a basketball into a hoop from across the court. Cool idea, but tough to pull off. Third, airplanes were super useful for reconnaissance, spying on the enemy from the sky, and close air support, helping soldiers on the ground by bombing enemy positions nearby. Think of planes as the ultimate lookout and backup crew for the troops. Fourth, the US started changing how they thought about air power. At first, planes were mostly for supporting the army or navy, but then they developed this idea of precision bombing, trying to hit specific targets like factories or bridges to cripple the enemy. It was a big shift in their air strategy. Finally, they got a bit cocky and believed that bombers could fly without fighter escorts and still be safe. They thought bombers were so tough that enemy planes couldn't stop them. Spoiler alert, World War II showed this wasn't always true, and they had to rethink that one. All these lessons created a kind of rule book or grammar for air warfare. But when World War II came along, they had to make some big changes to get it right. So, in a nutshell, the US learned that controlling the skies, using planes for spying and support, and aiming for precise targets were key. But they still had some learning to do when the next big war hit. Moving next to question number 4, which states discuss the implications of the US Army's hybridized tactical doctrine during the interwar years on its preparedness for future conflicts. Okay, let's make this super easy to understand. Dosto, during the 1920s and 1930s, the interwar years, the United States Army was trying to figure out the best way to fight wars. They came up with something called a hybridized tactical doctrine, which was like a mix of different ideas about how to battle. But this mix ended up causing some problems. Here's what happened. The Army's doctrine blended offensive ideas, like attacking the enemy aggressively, with defensive ideas, like digging in and holding your ground. They were influenced by their own experiences in World War I, where they fought in trenches, and also by French military thinking, which was super focused on defense, like building strong forts. Sounds like a good combo, right? Not quite. This mix of ideas made things confusing for commanders. Imagine being a coach with a playbook that tells you to run fast and stay put at the same time. It's hard to know what to do. This lack of clear direction meant commanders didn't have a solid game plan. It could lead to bad planning or even hesitation during battles, where every second counts. Because of this confusion, when World War II started, the United States Army wasn't as ready as it could have been. They struggled to respond consistently and confidently in the early fights. It's like showing up to a big game without practicing enough. You might still win, but it's going to be messy at first. The Army had to adapt quickly to get back on track. So, to sum it up, the US Army's hybridized tactical doctrine mixed attack and defense ideas, which confused commanders, led to shaky planning, and made the Army less prepared for the fast-paced battles of World War II. Dosto, hope you're liking this content. If you're really liking it, please do like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Moving on to next question, that is question number 5, which states, considering the evolution of American operational art, what lessons can contemporary military planners learn to address the complexities of modern warfare? Alright, let's break this down into bite-sized pieces. Dosto, operational art is all about planning battles and campaigns to win wars, and the US has learned a ton over the years. So, what can today's military planners take away from that history to handle modern wars, which can be super complicated? Here are the big lessons in simple terms. First, master both grammars of war. Remember those from question 2? The first grammar is fighting big, direct battles, like in Desert Storm, and the second grammar is tackling sneaky, irregular conflicts, like insurgencies in Iraq. Modern planners need to be ready for both. Think of it like being great at both a boxing match and a chess game, because wars today can switch between the two. Second, don't get too caught up in winning battles. Small tactical wins are awesome, but they need to connect to the big picture strategic goals, like stabilizing a country or stopping a global threat. It's like scoring points in a game, but making sure those points lead to winning the championship. Third, make sure your doctrine is clear, flexible, and unified. Doctrine is like the military's rulebook. It needs to be easy to understand, adaptable to new situations, and the same across the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. No more confusion like we saw in the interwar years. Fourth, invest in joint training, intelligence, and adaptability. This means getting all the military branches to train together, having top-notch info about the enemy, and being ready to change plans fast. Think of it as a team practicing together, staying sharp, and being ready to pivot if the game plan isn't working. Fifth, avoid rigid plans. Wars are unpredictable, so planners need to be ready to jump on new opportunities on the battlefield. It's like playing a video game. You've got a strategy, but you also need to react when something unexpected pops up. Finally, balance technology and human skill. Fancy tech like drones or AI is awesome, but it has to work with well-trained soldiers. And any new gadgets or ideas need to solve real problems, not just be cool for the sake of being cool. So, in a nutshell, today's planners should be ready for all kinds of fights, link every move to the big goal, keep plans clear and flexible, train hard, stay adaptable, and use tech wisely. These lessons from history are like a cheat code for tackling modern warfare. Alright, dosto, we're halfway through. Let's keep the momentum going with question 6, which states, what were the two phases of the first Gulf War, and what did each aim to achieve? Okay, let's make this super simple. The first Gulf War happened in 1990 to 1991 after Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait. The US and a huge group of allied countries stepped in to stop Iraq. This war had two main phases, each with its own goal. Let's go through them. The first phase was called Desert Shield. This was the defensive phase, like setting up a strong wall to protect someone. The goal? Stop Iraq from invading Saudi Arabia, a key US ally with tons of oil. Imagine Iraq charging towards Saudi Arabia after taking Kuwait. Desert Shield was about building up forces, getting troops and equipment in place, and saying, not on our watch. It was all about keeping Saudi Arabia safe. The second phase was Desert Storm, and this was the offensive phase, time to go on the attack. The goal here was to force Iraq to pull out of Kuwait. The US-led coalition, which included dozens of countries, launched a massive air and ground campaign to push Iraqi forces out by 15th January 1991. Picture a giant, well-coordinated team effort with planes bombing key targets and tanks rolling in to liberate Kuwait. It was fast, powerful, and showed the world what a united coalition could do. So, to sum it up, Desert Shield was about defending Saudi Arabia to stop Iraq's advance, and Desert Storm was about attacking to kick Iraq out of Kuwait. Together, these phases made the first Gulf War a textbook example of American operational art in action. Moving next to question number 7, which states, what is the difference between war's first grammar and second grammar? Alright, we talked about these grammars back in question 2, but this question gives us a slightly different take, so let's make it crystal clear in super simple terms. Think of the first grammar and second grammar as two different styles of handling war, like two different playbooks for a team. The first grammar is all about traditional combat. This is the classic, in-your-face fighting where the goal is to defeat the enemy's forces. It's about winning battles with speed, precision, and power. Think tanks rolling in, planes dropping bombs, and soldiers taking out enemy positions. Picture the US military in Desert Storm, like we just talked about, where they crushed Iraqi forces with fast, precise attacks. It's like a high-energy action movie where the focus is on beating the bad guy. The second grammar is totally different. This is about what happens after the big battles, during post-conflict operations. Instead of fighting, the focus is on stabilizing the area, keeping the peace, and making sure the local people see the effort as legitimate. This includes things like rebuilding schools, setting up a government, and working on long-term peace so the country doesn't fall back into chaos. Think of the US trying to rebuild Iraq after 2003, helping with elections, fixing infrastructure, and keeping things calm. It's less like an action movie and more like a long-term community project. So, in short, the first grammar is about fighting and winning battles with speed and power, while the second grammar is about rebuilding, stabilizing, and creating lasting peace after the fighting stops. Both are super important, but they're like two sides of a coin. Moving on to question number 8. What lessons were learned about operational art from conflicts like Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan? Dosto, let's understand it. Okay, operational art is the skill of planning battles and campaigns to achieve big-picture goals, and the US learned some huge lessons from these wars. Let's break them down in a way that's super easy to follow. First, winning battles doesn't mean winning the war. This is a big one. In Vietnam, the US won a lot of battles against enemy forces, but they still lost the war overall. Why? Because just beating the enemy on the battlefield wasn't enough to achieve the bigger goal of stabilizing the country or winning public support. It's like acing every level in a video game, but still losing because you didn't finish the final mission. Second, the US often focused too much on the first grammar of war. You know, the traditional combat stuff like speed and precision in battles. They were awesome at taking out enemy forces, but that wasn't always enough. In Iraq and Afghanistan, they learned they also needed to nail the second grammar, the post-conflict stuff like rebuilding communities, setting up governments, and keeping peace. Without mastering both, things could fall apart after the fighting stopped. Third, operational art needs to blend both grammars to actually succeed. Planners have to think about winning battles and creating lasting stability. For example, in Iraq after 2003, the US had to shift from just fighting insurgents to helping rebuild schools and infrastructure to win over the population. It's like being a superhero who not only stops the villain but also sticks around to fix the city. Finally, creativity in planning isn't enough, it has to work. Coming up with fancy battle plans is great, but if they don't lead to real results, they're useless. The US learned that plans need to be practical and effective, not just clever. So, to wrap it up, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan taught the US that winning battles isn't enough. They need to balance fighting with rebuilding, combine both grammars of war, and focus on plans that actually get the job done. These wars were tough, but they made the military smarter about operational art. Moving on to question number 9, which states, what was FM 3 to 24 and how did it try to address the insurgency problem? Dosto, let's make this super clear. FM 3 to 24 is a counter-insurgency manual released in 2006 by the United States Army and Marines. Think of it as a guidebook for fighting insurgents, those sneaky groups that use guerrilla tactics like ambushes or bombs instead of fighting in open battles. This was a huge issue in Iraq, so the military needed a new playbook. Here's what FM 3 to 24 was all about. First, it was based on the Maoist insurgency model. That's a fancy way of saying it looked at how insurgents, like those inspired by Mao Zedong's tactics in China, operate. They blend into the population, win local support, and attack when you least expect it. FM 3 to 24 studied this to figure out how to beat it. The manual put a big focus on legitimacy and building relationships with locals. Instead of just fighting, it said the military needed to win the trust of the people. For example, if locals see you as fair and helpful, they're less likely to support insurgents. It's like being a good neighbor instead of just a tough cop. It also included non-military actions like fixing roads, rebuilding schools, or helping with electricity. These things show the local people that the military is there to make life better, not just to fight. Imagine helping a community rebuild after a storm. It makes them want to work with you. That said, FM 3 to 24 wasn't perfect. Some people criticized it because it didn't have clear step-by-step solutions for the messy situation in Iraq. It was more like a set of ideas than a fix-everything plan. Still, it made a difference. It even helped guide some local militias to team up with the US to fight against groups like Al-Qaeda, which was a big win. So, in a nutshell, FM 3 to 24 was a 2006 counter-insurgency guide that focused on winning trust, rebuilding communities, and fighting insurgents by understanding their tactics. It wasn't a magic bullet, but it helped the United States navigate the tough insurgency problem in Iraq. Let's wrap up strong with question 10, which states, what challenges did the US face after the initial victories in Afghanistan and Iraq? Okay, dosto, let's break this down super simply. In wars like the 2003 Iraq invasion or the early Afghanistan campaign, the US military was amazing at winning battles fast. Think of Desert Storm or the lightning-fast takedown of Saddam Hussein's forces, total battlefield domination. But here's the problem. Winning the fight didn't always mean winning the war's bigger political goals, like creating a stable, friendly government. Let's look at why. First, there was not enough planning for post-war peace and rebuilding. The US was so focused on crushing the enemy that they didn't have a solid plan for what came next, like how to rebuild schools, set up a new government, or keep the country running. It's like winning a race, but forgetting to plan the victory party. Second, they lacked security forces to handle civil unrest. After the battles, things got chaotic. Looting, riots, and violence broke out in places like Iraq. The US didn't have enough troops or local police ready to keep the peace, which made it hard to maintain order. Imagine throwing a big event, but forgetting to hire security. Third, the US overestimated how smoothly the transition would go. They thought that once the enemy was defeated, the local people would quickly embrace a new government and everything would be fine. But it wasn't that easy. Cultural differences, local rivalries, and resentment got in the way. It's like expecting everyone to agree on a new plan without asking for their input. Finally, the insurgency caught the US unprepared. After the initial victories, groups like insurgents in Iraq started using guerrilla tactics, ambushes, bombs, and hit-and-run attacks. The US was ready for big battles, that first grammar we talked about. But this second grammar of irregular warfare was a whole different challenge, and they had to scramble to adapt. So, in a nutshell, quick battlefield wins were awesome, but without plans for peace, enough security, realistic expectations, and prep for insurgencies, the US struggled to achieve the bigger political goals in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a reminder that winning a war takes more than just winning fights. Dosto, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. If you learned something new or have your own thoughts on these topics, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Jai Hind.